Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com with your weekly news roundup for June 3rd, 2024. Nearly every week, I take a look at some of the headlines, news stories, and articles, some of the goings on around Colorado. Also, take a look at some upcoming events. It's been a little while. Haven't done a weekly news roundup since January when I flipped over to doing the legislative weekly updates. But legislature's over, ready to start looking at some of the bigger news stories going on in Colorado. Got a big election this year. So let's jump in. Of course, you can find everything at freestatecolorado.com. So any links to the articles discussed in this video, as well as some interviews, doing weekly interviews with some guests and liberty leaders from across our great state. What I want to talk about today is our horrible authoritarian governor, Jared Polis, signing an anti-gun law. Of course, Colorado had several anti-gun laws passed here this legislative session. Really disappointing, really tragic news. Unfortunately, governor has decided to sign a law banning firearms in certain places. This is from the GreeleyTribune.com. Bill applying to schools and government buildings is among gun measures passed by lawmakers. You can see the mom's demand detention right there. This article is originally from the Denver Post, June 2nd, 2024. Colorado has made it a misdemeanor to knowingly carry a firearm onto school grounds, into a polling place, or inside a government building, under a new law signed Friday by Governor Jared Polis. The ban, which takes effect July 1st, includes the open and concealed carry of firearms, and it applies to public and private schools, as well as colleges, universities, and child care centers. It contains exemptions for law enforcement, military, and security personnel, along with some others who carry guns as part of their official duties. Permitted concealed carry permit holders can have a firearm in parking lots adjacent to banned locations. Several other proposed gun-free zones were stripped from the bill as it moved through the legislature. So this is an absolutely terrible bill. Of course, it's going to leave people defenseless. I mean, come on, people. This is ridiculous. We've seen, unfortunately, Columbine, the STEM school shooting as well. Criminals are not going to follow the law. Criminals are going to show up with a firearm regardless of what's legal or not because they're intent on committing a violent crime. Laws like this only prohibit law-abiding, good people from carrying a firearm they can use to defend themselves and others. So shame on Jared Polis. Next time there is some sort of tragic event at one of these schools, they could have been prevented because somebody was there, a good person carrying a firearm to protect the people. They won't legally be able to under this stupid law. So shame on Jared Polis, shame on the state legislature who's trying to disarm Coloradans in every opportunity they get. Let's move on. From the Gazette.com from June 2nd, 2024. An editorial from the Gazette Editorial Board. TABOR can't stop the socialist drift. The state legislature gutted taxpayer refunds this year, but that's okay. Soon we can apply for the new Chicano special license plate as described in House Bill 1105 to benefit the small percentage of Latinos who self-identify as gender-specific Chicana or Chicano. It's just one of more than 100 bills chipping away at refunds owed to taxpayers under the state constitution's Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Sponsored by Socialist State Rep Tim Hernandez, the bill establishes, quote, a special license plate to support the Chicano community and in connection therewith making an appropriation, end quote. Another bill appropriates cash for criminals to seal their criminal records. Another pays the court fees for tenants facing eviction. One pays for criminals, including those convicted of a violent felony, to work in occupations regulated by the state, think medical workers, teachers, and school counselors. Quote, amid a period of state revenue growth in unprecedented excess of the referendum C spending cap and a state budget larger than $40 billion for the first time in history, the state's legislative majority has seen fit to circumvent the standard refund mechanisms through a long list of proposed tax rate reductions, tax credits, and redistribution efforts, states a new report by the nonpartisan Common Sense Institute. The report details bills passed this year that will slash the TABOR refund to a quarter of its projected size, mostly to fund special interests. Through such measures, the state will diminish taxpayers' agency to decide whether by saving, investing, or donating to charity how best to allocate money that they would normally be owed, the report explains. The legislature's approach to these cuts broadly undermines TABOR's intent by divorcing taxpayers' contributions to state revenue from the values of refunds they receive and deciding for them how that money should be spent instead. The report documents bills reducing TABOR refunds by $523 million in fiscal year 24 and $1.06 billion in fiscal year 25 and 1.25 billion in fiscal year 26. Absolutely crazy. Another bill chipping away at refunds owed under the state's constitution, Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, funds House Bill 1280, which budgets $375,000 on a welcome reception and integration program to provide appropriate services for migrants who are within 1 year of arrival in the United States. That's state government taking money owed to taxpayers and spending it on people who recently arrived or might arrive in the future, who have done nothing to support state government and have few prospects of doing so. The list is full of legislation that takes money from law abiding taxpayers and gives it to special interest groups, including criminals and immigrants here illegally. When taxpayers lose hard earned money to government, politicians should ensure the money serves them. The working consumers of Colorado should get better roads, more public safety, education, scholarship, and social services for people who live there. Instead, the working, law abiding, tax paying, and diverse people of Colorado will lose more than $2.8 billion over the next 3 years on agendas that won't help most of them. Against their will, they will pay to ease the way for more immigrants here illegally, deadbeat tenants, and criminals hoping to hide from their past. The Colorado Constitution, despite the will of voters, cannot stop Colorado's march toward a heavy, top heavy, command control economy that picks and chooses winners and losers, discourages production, rewards dysfunction, and divides us into groups. As Karl Marx best explained such a distribution scheme, quote, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, end quote. And in Colorado, without regard for the law enacted by the governed, the Gazette Editorial Board. Well, really well said. Of course, the state legislature, these politicians want to steal every penny they can from us. They want to redistribute it to their special projects, their cronies, their friends, and strip us of our ability to save money. It's absolutely infuriating that these legislators won't let us keep the money that's owed to us for our tax refunds. I mean, the real answer here, obviously, change to who's elected in the office, do everything possible to strengthen TABOR, and reduce that money going into the state government by cutting taxes. So, people, we see where this is going. We see where Colorado's headed unless people get involved. We see what they're doing, just making life more expensive, more difficult, death by 1,000 cuts. But let's move on. The Colorado Sun. Eminent domain, used often to seize land from private owners, has 95-year-old farm fearing for its survival. Gosh, this is a terrible, terrible story. Really sad that they're doing this. Let's take a look. Brighton's Parkland Metropolitan District Number 1 to exercise eminent domain on a 2-acre strip of land that could ruin the historic Palazzi farm. A judge is expected to rule on the case today. This is from May 31st, 2024. Brighton. I'm not young, I'm not stupid, and it's not going to happen. That's what Debbie Palazzi told developer Jack Hoagland when he knocked on her door in 2022 and offered her $75,000 to run a stormwater pipeline from a subdivision he wanted to build through land her family has been farming for 95 years. Now that land could fall into Hoagland's hands. He has asked an Adams County judge to decide whether Parkland Metropolitan District, of which he is president, can exercise eminent domain on Palazzi's property to the west of the proposed Bromley Farms neighborhood. If that happens, Palazzi said it will destroy her ability to continue farming 65 acres that sit between 6th Avenue and Bromley Lane in Brighton. A pipeline across the property would also devalue its future development potential, she said, limiting how it can be subdivided. Quote, and it will take away a 63-year-old's and a 65-year-old's ability to make a living, she added, referring to herself and her longtime partner, Jose Gutierrez. The case has sparked outrage among supporters who say the Palazzi farm is more than just a place that grows food. It's an anchor in a rapidly changing community. District Judge Shara Stout's decision is due Friday. The case highlights a power every landowning Coloradan should understand. Eminent domain allows a government to acquire private land if it is deemed to have legitimate use for the public benefit. Usually, the determination of what is public use is laid out in the Constitution or statutes, says Donald M. Ostrander, the lawyer representing Palazzi Farm. But sometimes the courts have to make the decision of whether the alleged public use is truly public. In the Plaza case, which involves housing development in a 95-year-old farm that provides the public with fresh food, it seems there are only complicated answers. So definitely check this story out, read more to learn this what's going on there in Brighton. It's really sad what the government is doing. Of course, these metropolitan districts are some of the most local level of government that people don't even know exist. You're paying your taxes to them. Your property taxes goes towards these metropolitan districts, these special districts. People need to pay attention to them because one day they could be knocking on your door trying to take your farm from you or your property from you. Let's go ahead and move on. This is from the Denver Gazette. Colorado voters face complicated options on property taxes in November. So, of course, one of the biggest stories I've been covering for the last few years is the property tax debacle here in Colorado. Property taxes are increasing. People on fixed incomes, people are having trouble paying just their rent as it is. To raise taxes is only going to make things worse here in Colorado, less affordable for people. This article is from June 3rd, 2024. Voters to decide between state legislatures' proposed fixed and ballot measures. Colorado voters face two broad options that seek to tackle soaring property tax valuations. One enacted by lawmakers to cut both residential and commercial assessment rates, and another via proposed initiatives to revert taxing levels back to 2 years ago and then place a hard cap on revenue growth. To lawmakers, their proposal, which garnered the support of Democrats and Republicans alike in the recently concluded legislative session, achieves their overarching goal of providing stability and certainty to property taxes, while inoculating schools and local governments from dramatic changes to their ability to fund spending priorities. To the proponents of the two initiatives, their solution provides a more meaningful and larger relief to property owners, while offering certainty by tampering down wide oscillations in people's taxing obligations. Meanwhile, a political observer noted that the competing strategies appear to have divided the conservative movement in Colorado. In either outcome, he said, voters will receive some tax relief. If the measures fail in November, this will be at least in place, said Sage Nauman, who served as a communications director for Senate Republicans and runs his own consulting firm, so that people will be paying less in years to come. So definitely check that out. I'll be talking a lot more about property taxes very soon, and of course, leading up to the November election. Let's move on. So another ballot initiative here in Denver this time, coming up in November. This is from the Denver Gazette. Proposed Denver Slaughterhouse ban could cost Colorado economy up to $861 million, study shows. Wow. Slaughterhouse ban to face Denver voters on November ballot. Article from June 2nd, 2024. If Denver's ballot measure to ban slaughterhouses is approved by voters in November, it could cost Colorado's economy up to $861 million and impact nearly 3,000 jobs, according to a study by Colorado State University's Regional Economic Development Institute. Denver voters will be asked, quote, shall the voters of the city and county of Denver adopt an ordinance prohibiting slaughterhouses and in connection beginning January 1st, 2026, prohibiting the construction, maintenance, or use of slaughterhouses within the city and requiring the city to prioritize residents whose employment is affected by the ordinance in workforce training or employment assistance programs. Absolutely ridiculous, folks. This is just another attack on meat, attack on agriculture, attack on our way of life. Pro Animal Future, a group that works to protect animal rights, introduced the ballot measures. Gosh. CSU study found that banning slaughterhouses in Denver could impact 2,787 jobs, plus significantly reduce lamb slaughtering capacity and adversely impact businesses. So, really bad stuff. Of course, some of these radical people don't really care about humans. They care more about these animals than they do about people. But, people want to eat meat. People want to work in the meat industry. People want to raise meat. So let's hope the voters reject this ballot measure to ban slaughterhouses in Denver this November. Moving on. Story you may have heard of. Sign of the times here, this brave new world we're going into from the Denver Pest. Police drones responding to 911 calls in Colorado. This really is the future of law enforcement. Denver police and other front range agencies planning to deploy remote controlled aircraft as first responders. Gosh, there you go. You might see a drone flying outside your window looking in. Some suspicious activity. We've seen how many times the police get it wrong. So kind of frightening to think that there's going to be these flying drones around your neighborhood or around your community. So we'll have to see what kind of guardrails are put up to prevent the misuse, of course. Picture this. You call 911 and a drone comes whirring to your door instead of a police officer. That could soon be a reality along parts of Colorado's Front Range. A handful of local law enforcement agencies are considering using drones as first responders. That is, sending them in response to 911 calls as police departments across Colorado continue to widely embrace the use of remote controlled flying machines. Even the Denver Police Department, which long has resisted drones, is now launching its own program and wants to eventually use them to respond to 911 calls across the city. This really is the future of law enforcement at some point, whether we like it or not, said Sergeant Jeremiah Gates, who leads the drone unit at the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. Like at least 20 Front Range agencies, the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office already uses drones for tasks that include searching for missing people, mapping crime or crash scenes, providing overhead surveillance during SWAT operations, or tracking fleeing suspects. But now the sheriff's office is considering using its 20 drones to respond to certain 911 calls, setting them both instead of officers and ahead of officers, Gates said. A remote control drone could be flown to the location of an incident to scope out the area and stream live video back to its operator, who could provide quick, detailed information to responding officers about what's going on. Or a drone might be the sole response to a 911 call if the operator can determine from the air that officers don't need to respond. It's a fledgling but growing trend across policing, and one that raises alarm for American Civil Liberties Union of Colorado staff attorney Laura Morath. Quote, "We're worried about what it would mean if drones were really just all over the skies in Colorado," she said. "We are worried about what that would mean for First Amendment activities, for speech and organizing and protesting, because being surveilled by law enforcement, including by drones, can change the way people speak and protest." So there you go. Very interesting article. There's a whole list here of different law enforcement agencies that have drones, use drones. So something to keep an eye on, something to ensure that there's not abuse taking place, right? Interesting times. Last article of the week here from also the Denver Gazette. Auraria campus officials receive notice of possible litigation from Jewish students. This is May 31st, 2024. A Jewish Metropolitan State University of Denver student has filed a notice with the Auraria Higher Education Center, alleging she and others faced harassment and defamation on campus in the days after the Hamas attack on Israel, the Denver Gazette has learned. Sarah Rones, a 19-year-old MSU student, filed the notice on April 5th, as required under the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, before pursuing a lawsuit. The law is designed to protect public agencies and the individuals who run these entities from unlimited liability. Under the law, the default is that public entities enjoy immunity from liability, but that immunity is waived for damages or injuries arising out of wrongful actions in specific contexts. Dan Ernst, a civil and constitutional rights attorney in Denver representing Rones, said the pro Palestinian protests, which erupted on the campus and elsewhere in the country after the Hamas attack, left Jewish students fearful and unprotected. As many as 50 students on the Auraria campus stopped attending classes, Ernst said. She, Rones, thinks, and I agree, it's an awful situation to have students here in America being pushed off of campus in this manner, Ernst told the Denver Gazette in an exclusive interview. The way Ernst sees it, campus officials are culpable in not preventing the emotional distress of Rones and other unnamed Jewish students. Rones is seeking punitive damages estimated $150,000, according to the notice. So there you go. We've seen what happened in Auraria. Definitely, obviously what's happening in the Middle East is horrible, but what's happening here in Colorado's college campuses is potentially creating an unsafe situation. Targeting Jewish students should not be tolerated. I hope these Jewish students get armed and be able to defend themselves from some of these horrible, horrible people out there. All right. Last story I want to talk to you about this week. Not really a story, but a big event coming up. This is on Wednesday, June 5th. Definitely an event you want to be at. It says Denver's premier Liberty meetup at Denver Liberty on the Rocks, Crypto-Anarchy and the Cypherpunks with Josh from Liberty on the Rocks. This is at the Independence Institute in downtown Denver. I will be guest hosting, so I really hope you make it. In the early 90s, several hackers and technologists were inspired by recent developments in technology and cryptography and simultaneously frustrated with the state of politics. To that end, they devolved a philosophy that could potentially lead them and us toward a new strategy for preserving our freedom. Join us once again as our host Josh gives us a presentation on the philosophy of crypto-anarchy and the cypherpunks. We will once again be meeting at the Independence Institute, not at Choppers, if you're an old-time Liberty on the Rocks member. Doors open at 6, talk starts at 7, drinks will be provided. Anyone is welcome to bring their own food or food to share. So please check that out. It's at meetup.com. Denver Liberty on the Rocks, Liberty on the Rocks Denver. An event you want to check out. A great way to meet liberty minded individuals. This is going to be a great talk. Josh is very passionate about this subject and knows a lot. It's going to be a lot of fun. Crypto-Anarchy and the Cypherpunks. Hope you can make it. Well, that's what I got for this week. The links are at freestatecolorado.com. Happy to be back. Got to get back in the groove here of doing these weekly roundups, but thanks for joining me. Look forward to talking to you soon. Do interviews and articles on the way.